recount of projects I've worked on since living in BC, Canada. Mostly the projects are for performing and music, made solely by myself, and I have a wonderful time bringing them to life. When I first moved off our boat, I didn't have much to work with. Basic tools, a couple of instruments, and stuff I worked on while on the boat. So things are really rather crude. I acquired an old Casio from the scrapyard, but it was physically pretty bad, so I turned it into my first synth. This would be an extension to play with the computer or my Kawaii keyboard, which yes, I had on the boat via MIDI. It had a very different, almost lo-fi sound to it. I always liked the little wooden box I made to house the PCB. Occasionally I still use it when I want that good old Casio sound. Next was this amp, yanked out of an old stereo system. It was maybe only 100 watts total, but could drive scrapyard speakers I found, so a live performance was possible. Eventually I bought a used 1000-watt bass amp and a Marantz amp and got more speakers, but this was okay in a pinch. My next amp project was a Class D 600-watter with added EQ and digital control. It could even be controlled via MIDI, which I included with some songs I performed. Changing left-right channels and EQ was fully automatic and was like having a sound guy on the controls. Pretty cool. On my second performance I blew out my speakers, so I had to replace those in the tower cabinets. The old PVs, donated by a friend, have held up no problem though. The next order of business was to create a light show for performing at night and inside dark bars, etc. Back then, LED lighting wasn't very good yet, so this controller was made with a set of 120-volt light dimmers. The high wattage lights it drove are mounted on a large triangle frame that I still use today. It's semi-intelligent when used with just sound going into the music, or it can be controlled via MIDI in a song playing. Usually FL Studio was my backing. It also switches a bunch of low-power string lights for added effect around the stage. As LEDs became cheaper and more powerful, I decided to build some Wi-Fi MIDI-controlled PARs, each with 150 watts equivalent in red, green, and blue, and each with white as well. Being wireless, they could be attached in various places around the stage and controlled from the main panel, or via MIDI for automation. It was all wireless anyway. Another light that I would only use when performing alone, as other musicians would complain about how bright it was, is in the form of a bar that could mechanically rotate parts to be direct or reflected with motors. It creates a wide beam of light or a diffused foot lighting. It also is MIDI controlled and every color imaginable. When it's fully on, it can emit over 700 watts of equivalent light. I have since made a 3D printed bezel to address the complainers, but haven't used that yet. The stage light that I am most proud of though is the light strip. It's simple, roll-uppable overhead and backing light that has very intelligent algorithm in it that almost appears to be alive. It's very sensitive and has many sequences that are impressive to say the least. It seems to know builds, drops, and styles of music. It has been used on my own stage and others, including at a flight simulator promo event. I have some pretty extreme ideas for the future. Whether I'll build them or not, who knows? I decided to make some amplified stage speakers, mostly for other performers, and used some nice little speakers I found in a pawn shop. I used a Chinese 400-watt Class D amp to drive up to 4 of these with 100 watts apiece. My neighbor gave me an old EQ pedal and I decided to build that in as well. It can also be used as a guitar or mic amp as desired. See the adjustable angle brackets? Great on stage. As I also like the DJ scene, I'm practicing to become perhaps a DJ for small events or parties. Thanks to DJ Mixxx, an open source firmware that I believe is still the best, I could get into it. I built a custom controller to work with it from an old keyboard case and loved to use it until I got a real DJ machine. One very bizarre project to further automate performances is the SDS Keypad. The idea is to let the background or mood video projecting to the screen behind the stage control the loading and playing of backing music, basically controlling the whole set. Special little bars added to the end of a video are read by the processor through a VGA interpreter, triggering numbered macros to load any song into FL programs or even the next video through a auto hotkeys program. This was crazy amazing, but never got the chance to use it on a real stage. With the coming of HDMI formats, the project is kinda obsolete now. Regardless, it was uber cool. Hauling all of this gear to gigs was becoming a problem as our truck is only so big, and we ended up having to use the car too. So for smaller shows, I decided to make this small thing called a show-in-a-box. It looks nice, doesn't it? I designed and built a minimal mixer with EQs and proper buses to plug into. The shape is obvious and is simple and easy. It boasts a sample player machine, mostly for drums and sound effects. There's also a DIY 48 kHz sample recorder. It's only mono, but inspired developing the Reflex Live Loop, which I'll mention in a bit. There's also a FL dashboard to control it via MIDI. Next, there's a built-in distortion board I designed. That's built around an 8-bit processor and only has 8-bit sound, but impressive sounding nonetheless, especially when the analog-style Bucket Brigade chip is on. The sample machine, when used with MIDI though, has a few issues. Double tapping, a problem with the V-drums is a biggie, as well as just not recognizing MIDI protocols and totally failing right away, making it unusable with any drum hardware. Once I figured out what was happening, I designed the MIDI Fix, a box gouged out of a 2x4 due to lack of having anything else immediate, which processes the signals into something the MPX does understand. The second design is built in, so no more worries with that. Another addition to the show-in-a-box is the SDS My Sense 2, a wavetable synth designed from the ground up, and in a way, very uniquely as it can be seen here. I often use it with FL Studio and the modular rig because it really has its own sound. It uses many Vactrol type LED CDS cells and is very tiny really. In FL Studio I went as far as designing a dashboard to MIDI control it. Also the distortion pedal got one. Love it! The show-in-a-box is part of my attempt to get away from depending on a computer on stage. I've had a couple of mishaps with onstage computers and it's not fun. Further projects would reflect this intention. The SDS On Tap is a secret project, but basically, by tapping on a pedal to get the tempo, it will play various drum sequences. It's pretty basic and even has a sample-based drum synth built in. Because it outputs MIDI drums, it's really a step up when performing, even in the smallest of cases. I rarely use it anymore because the Pedal 7 I designed has this built in. I'll show you that in a moment. An interesting backstory to the SDS Tap, so named at the time, was the prospect of getting this manufactured. Not this, but a more trim and focused pedal all in one. I had designed the thing and was hemming and hawing going to market, and suddenly the buddy appeared. This would cause a major problem with patents, as there's a crooked place in Texas that leans towards the plaintiff to sue the poor inventors of products to the point they agree to pay for a new statue or a new fountain for the town. This is really happening, and I didn't want to risk that, so I folded. A while later, my partner and I were watching a documentary about a certain individual that acquired a lot of money through gray area illegal activities. They tried to jail him, but eventually he got out thanks to a very expensive lawyer and started some companies with what he had left. One of those companies was the Buddy. Thank God I didn't go up against that with their millions. I'm poor. Notice how I bleeped out the name and stuff? Seems like a good product anyway. So back to the evolution of the Pedal 7. The Pedal 7 was inspired by the Reflex Live Loop, which I'll mention in a bit, and the Voice Live 2, an amazing mic processor. As an option with the Voice Live Touch 2, you can get a pedal 6 to control the thing, which I was gonna build rather than paying the crazy shipping from the States. Then I started thinking, way more could be added to this. It has MIDI, and the Pedal 7 was born. My first project was to make a battery case for the VLT2 so it could be super portable if needed. The Pedal 7 can also run on batteries or used as a straight control for the VLT2, but has way more added in. It started out simply enough, a small Arduino to run the basic beats and output MIDI drums, MIDI to the VLT2, and some CV outputs to clock a Eurorat Modular setup. The plastic bits were all 3D printed, which was cool, and looks nicer, but the rugged case was made from wood. Some weeks later, I decided to incorporate a bigger processor, more output, and much more capabilities to the unit. Then again, I added to it with the expansion board incorporated into the Reflex Live Loop sampler, the Flash 8, I had designed for the modular world. This would give it sample effects, any sound that it could hold, real drums, vocal zaps, and more, all triggered from a MIDI channel. Operation of the unit is quite simple, and it can create a drum beat sequences to loop with the VLT2 looping mic and guitar in sync. So basically a looper as well. Entire songs backing can be dialed up and played, making this the perfect stage companion. It can run from external clock, create its own clock from the tap pedal, or use a MIDI clock if desired. Each pedal, except the middle one, is assignable per song. It also has multiple MIDI I/O for adding keyboards, wonderful for pitch shifting, and outputting to a synth and lights even, and all-in-one to accompany the show in a box, or by itself. Then along came Eurorat Modular. I couldn't believe modular synth had come back, and so much better. The size is half the old standard from the 60s, plus digital tech has worked its way into the previously only analog realm. And holy shit, a lot of people are doing it. I met up with a guy who wanted to collab on a project and needed me to help design it. I said, sure, why not? And suddenly, a whole world of modular opened up in front of me. Wow. While this project, and another that we worked on, never got past the design stage, I was secretly coming up with the Mod-M module. Mod-M stands for Modular Emulator. This is a single module that would take care of getting or building several modules in short order by having a lot built into itself. A VCO, sequencer, math, analog to MIDI converter, MIDI to analog converter, clock source, and even a VCA was all in one module. It wasn't overly accurate, but suited the need for testing new designs. The first module I designed to sell was the Reflex Live Loop. It turned out to be a pioneering sampler and is sought even 3 years after it became impossible to continue manufacturing it. It has no DSP, making it a raw and unique sounding sampler with capabilities beyond what's even out there now. Unfortunately, we had to stop producing it as several parts became expensive, while others went obsolete. After the Reflex, the SDS VCO, a much simpler module, was designed. It has a built-in envelope generator and a VCA, all in one 3 HP package, plus several firmwares to make it something else, similar to the Disting. Also a backplane MIDI was added to the second run. It really has its own sound, sort of like the before mentioned My Sense 2. For a short while I had started on the RITM project, but it was written in assembly language like the SDS VCO and the Flash 8, mainly for speed, and it took a lot longer than anticipated. Once the VCO was out there, work on the RITM recommenced, but it was a hard bugger to nail down. It's a cool module, but I don't ever want to write in assembly code again. Life's too short. Prior to moving off the boat and living in BC, all I ever did was assembly. But as you get older, you realize that it's taken too much time, so I went over to C instead. Because Microchip's CIDE is horrible, I changed to Atmel and STM, only to discover that Microchip has bought up Atmel. Thankfully, they didn't evoke their IDE with the Atmel products. A couple more modules have been designed and are out there too. The Accord Melisma and the Accord Sequoia. I collaborated to design the Melisma because it has musical properties I'm unfamiliar with, while my partner in the collaboration knows a lot. It was a learning experience for me, for us both. The Sequoia I consider the pinnacle of my design ability. It took probably 2 years to complete and is a Swiss Army knife for sequencing and VCO control. I am proud of its abilities and love producing music on it. Its small size makes it very portable too. Other projects, non-musical, like Vario 1 and Vario 2, were put together along with these modules. The two Varios actually do music instead of just sliding notes, which drives me crazy. Variometers tell you when you're going up and when you're coming down fast. Useful when you're paragliding. I built a battery-powered MIDI rack so I could be the first to patch a modular while flying. I also built an electric paramotor, but I'm not really able to use it in BC. Nonetheless, it's built. Another first was mounting this 0.4mm pitch synth chip, which I have done a couple more times since. It seems no one else has done it by hand before. I used it in a module and this crazy first from my parents. It's also part Melisma and part Sequoia, a very unique gift item for sure. I'm still frightened by VGA chips though, but then you never know. I've made several other modules that didn't make it to the market yet. Some of them are just for my own use too. It's nice to be able to build something rather than try to find something that does the job. As a result, nearly all my modules are my own. Almost every project I have built has a manual. Any publicly released modules have maybe a bit much, like the original Reflex manual, but I am getting better at it. The Sequoia needed a decent-sized manual because it's a very complex module, although easy at first glance. Recently I've been designing stuff to go with DJ Mixxx and Modular. This one utilizes the Reflex Live Loop multi-record play function, useful when DJing, while this one is a very useful clock generator from DJ Mixx's clock, so the songs will align with the modular. It was a bit tricky, but it is stable now and may hit the market if there's enough interest in it. Future projects involving live performance and the studio alike, as well as new and exciting modules for the Accord series, are on the horizon. I hope you have enjoyed this little recount as much as I have enjoyed making it. I'm Sandra Sims. Thanks for watching.